was a blessing in disguise because it sort of brought us to the slow pace, and you could relax and replan and rethink. Because before then, life was just really moving really fast. So if it was a design by somebody to slow down planet Earth's movement, great job. If it is a natural
I think we need
disease,
some amount of stillness to really understand what's
Mother
going
Nature.
on, right?
Yeah, let me just move back here. Anyway, yeah, let's get started.
So, I mean, your own journey so far, if you could give a bit of an introduction about your own upbringing in Botswana, and from there, and how you got into these hands running the organization as well, right? So maybe that would be interesting to start with.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, hello everyone. Name is Thabiso Mashaba, but everybody just calls me Black, and it's an acronym I actually gave myself. It's BLAK, and it stands for I'm Black and I'm loud and I'm keen to make a difference. So it comes from something, right? So I was born into Botswana to a mother whose mother was sort of a refugee from Namibia, from the Herero clan. And, she settled first in the refugee camp, and then back in those days, the laws in Botswana allowed that after some time you are naturalized and you can become a citizen. So she was naturalized, so I was born and I was raised by this, woman and her kids who were, they were struggling. They were poor, basically. And, but she always made sure that when we had to go to school, we looked like all other kids. Like you couldn't even tell like where we woke up from or what we ate this morning. We looked like all other kids. And she valued education a lot. So she always encouraged us to try and ask questions. When we even get home, ask her questions, even though she wouldn't know, she'll try and figure it out. And so this whole upbringing led to my mother actually starting off her first work as a social worker. So as a social worker working for the government in local authorities, she was transferred from one village to one village, across the country. So I grew up literally, I would say, in almost all parts of Botswana.
What
And
kind of social work was she doing? What was it consisting of?
So basically she was working, so Botswana basically has a social welfare program, and she was facilitating that at the grassroots level. So basically those people who are orphans and need support, those people who are destitute and need support, the juvenile delinquents who need support, just impoverished people who just need support. So a pool of all those people who are different. And so, everywhere she would go, I would see the poverty gap. And because she and my father were working for the local authority, which is government, I kept asking them, so how come these guys, so for example, when I was doing kindergarten and staying in some faraway village in the desert, it's called Hukunzi. So I would walk there in the morning every day. And every day I would be walking there, I'd be working with a group of the San community kids who stayed in the clinic hospital compound for that village. And they were going to this public kindergarten, which belonged to the government. And they would go with me, but they would be wearing their traditional regalia. The girls would be wearing their traditional leather bras and the traditional leather skirts. And it'll be real winter time. And I'll be wearing like a beanie, gloves, bomber jacket, a sweater, pants, more pants under other pants, socks, and closed shoes. And every time I would come from school, I would have given each one of my friends something of mine so that they also keep warm. And my mother would scold me a lot, like, why did you do that? Why did you do that? And then I'll tell her, like, well, I felt like my friends were cold and I had all these things, so I felt I could share.
So right? The ethnic wear was something which was difficult for the winter time?
Curious.
Was it difficult to wear the ethnic wear in the winter?
It was because like they were
cold outside.
So in the desert it gets really, really cold during winter time, especially in the mornings and in the evenings. So in the mornings, early mornings when we were going to school before the sun is really, good, these guys would just be walking literally, I would say undressed, because like for the guys it's even worse because it's just a traditional form and that's it. And then they would be holding a stone that they left in fire. So they'll be tossing it from one hand to the other just to keep warm. But it wasn't sufficient, right? So I used to question all these things, ask my mom, like, how come that guy doesn't have a bomber jacket? How come you didn't get him a bomber jacket and you got me a bomber jacket? So she kept telling me, like, it's governance, the system is like this, and then so I've always questioned that. I've always questioned the inequality between different people who stay in
Inequality.
the same zone. Yeah, and then so over time, as I got to university, I studied economics and accounting. And then there was a time when one lecturer of mine just walked into the room and said, for an open economy to exist, there needs to be perfect information. So first I asked her, what is perfect information? So she said, so if we're going to design a policy to deal with malaria, for example, as we design it as policymakers, all the information that we are designing it with so that the people can actually own it needs to be coming from the people so that they can own it and run it with it and are able to actually, sustain themselves off that policy. But
When you
as it
say as
is, we're
open
just designing
information,
policies for
do you
people.
mean when you say open information should be made available to the people, do you mean that the information should be accessible by the people? Or how does it, what is the finer interpretation of
Yeah, so
that sentence
basically,
which you said?
yeah, we say an open economy, we're talking about a mixed economy which has little government influence, but has also a market and, the market deciding the prices of things in that
Mhm.
particular setup. But when you make the policies, you need to make sure that the policies are actually going to have an impact, right? So people should own them. So for example, if you're making a COVID-19 policy right now to say, okay, we are going to make everyone wear a mask, right? But if you know the situation on the ground, you can choose to say, okay, those that can afford to make masks for themselves or buy masks for themselves, please buy them. But to everybody else whom we
It
know
would
can't
not be an
afford, we will
affordable
provide
option
them.
for all of
Yeah,
them, right?
exactly. Yeah, exactly. But if you are just going to do it top down, you basically have a blanket approach for everyone, and that never really solves anything, and it perpetuates that exist. Of these, I think, was born there because I then took the honors myself and said, what's the one thing that's not actually working in this economy that I can try and create perfect information around, and then see if actually, if you create perfect information, things will actually move towards a better trajectory. So I had always loved singing and music. And so I felt like, we have only produced one international DJ in Botswana, and his name was DJ Fresh. And every
I
other
think I've
DJ that's
heard,
coming up never
I
actually.
was seeing
You had DJ
I
Fresh,
seeing
right?
some posts of DJ Fresh from your Facebook, by the way. Was it
Yeah,
the same
that's
person?
him right there. Yeah,
Oh,
so
that's
now
nice.
he's based full time in
What's happening
Africa,
with him?
and he's a big international DJ.
Hmm.
Yeah, so he's a radio presenter and he's also a dance DJ, and he has produced so many compilations. And this was after he left law school in Botswana to go and start casting school in South Africa, and he got there and he's doing great things, right? So the market in South Africa and the atmosphere in South Africa allowed him to flourish. So I realized, maybe if we recreate some things to be able to actually support the environment that the DJs could flourish in Botswana, then we could possibly get more international DJs. So I did sort of like a DJ symposium where I had him, DJ Fresh, and other international DJs come, and then they engaged with our DJs, shared some like professional tips, and we used those professional tips by thinking of the participants who were the local DJs
So
to
he could be
come
like the
up with the
icon
policy
to
document. Yeah,
inspire the youth,
he's an
right?
icon. So everybody is inspired by him who's a DJ out of Botswana, right? So they look up to him. So when he guides them as to how they should get gigs, how they should make sure that they always have a contract, how they should always make sure they professionally and, prepare their technical right time, all those things. they took it to heart, and then they also shared what their rules were, and we packaged these rules. We took and through. They reviewed them, and which is a subsector under music or arts, the sector of right. So after learning this, I realized, hey, there is actually value in this perfect information. Here's now an opportunity. We've just designed right policy framework for DJs, and they look like they're excited about it, and it's supporting them. And they went on to form a DJ union in Botswana and all those things, which I'm quite happy about. I'm no longer involved in that space, but they still check on me from time to time, and I value that because it shows that the work that we did together, they valued it. So I took this, and I was going to now expand it to try and get government to recognize the creative industries of Botswana as an official sector. So now the entire sector, as opposed to just one minute subsector of the economy. And, I set out to do a Botswana music conference. It had its struggles, and then it led me to some debts because I was just doing it out of my pockets and passion. And so I had to close shop on the Black Audio Fire, which was the name of the business that I had started. And I was still a student, right? But I learned a lot from then. Then
Black,
I had
sorry to
to
interrupt,
manage
but I have a question here. So you were mentioning about the economies in general, right? Like in terms of top-down planning and how certain policies, if you just have a blanket approach to things, right? And then you got into talking about the creative industry as well, talking about the DJ. I'm trying to find the connection here. So I'm just somewhere losing the connection as to, I could see there was a motivation for you to flourish the creative industry, but I'm trying to understand with the economics point of view, which you had as a background.
Yes. So with the economics background, I realized I'm not a good DJ, but I have the skill, which is economics. And nobody's going to do the administrative work and the educational work and the facilitation work. So I took the honors to be the one to bridge this perfect information between government and artists, or artists and government, or the entire creative industry and government. Because I saw the creative industry as an opportunity to diversify the economy of Botswana from mining dependency and tourism.
It could create more businesses, right? Creative industry is itself. If it could flourish in some way,
it will more create more self-employments. It'll create more jobs for the youth who are currently unemployed. It'll create a lot of jobs for the informal sector, people who are in the rural communities who are currently not recognized by the sector. And so I took the honors to create that perfect information. So first I lobbied government from the DJ point of view, just to test the waters with one subsector. And then after its success, then I grew it into the entire music industry. After that success, then I grew it
entire
into the
creative industry after that.
Yeah. And then eventually I got to start, because these came when I was my master program, so that I can do a thesis to try and measure the contribution of the creative industries to GDP, because I needed that amount or contribution to convince government as to why they need to create a budget and support the creative industries even more with the real budget, as opposed to treating them as a pastime.
So this could be acting
while I was
as a
doing my
real proof
masters,
to push the government to take major policies to support the creative industry, right?
Yeah. So if the creative industries is contributing $9 million to the GDP, then they should either get equal or more, so that they are boosted and they can actually keep contributing back to GDP and sustaining the economy, but more importantly, creating the jobs and the right impact on the ground, right? So in doing this, then I heard of, on our Masters in Development Practice dashboard, our professor shared an opportunity in Zambia from MIT, which was called the International Development Design Summit. I was like, so maybe this one, IDDS. So it's like, okay, so maybe this summit is about people gathering and thinking about how policies could be designed differently, whatnot, right? So I'm excited, I apply. And I never got a response from them until like the 11th hour when the actual thing was starting like next week, and it was Friday today. And they told me I got it, but I need to find my transport to get there. So I struggled a bit, but luckily my university paid for my bus fare, and I took a 24-hour bus ride from
Oh, that's
Botswana to
quite long.
Zambia. Yeah, it's quite long, but it was quite refreshing too, because it was like, when you have this hunger for something, you're excited and you're like, yeah, we're going in. So in fact, I felt very revolutionary when I was in that bus ride. I felt like, yeah, I'm going to make a real change. So I got to Zambia, and then I realized, oh no, this summit is about people making technologies with communities for communities. I'm like, interesting. So, and then it was practical as opposed to the kind of policy influence direction I was coming from. Yeah, mine was a bit practical in the sense that I put people in a room, I gathered information from them, I packaged that information, and I used that as a white paper document. But in
I
this
think it was more
case,
like a macro versus micro kind of a perspective.
exactly, right? Yeah, exactly, yeah. And then with this one, it was a little bit more micro and it was more tangible. So basically, the people would create a technology or a product, and you can actually see it. And when you are making a case, you can actually talk to about the project and say the project can do this, and this, and it sells for this, and people can employ themselves like this with it, stuff like that, right? And so on coming
So
back
the
from Zambia,
conference was more of a participatory form of development of technology where the
yeah,
community gathers together and you mobilize them to make them
exactly.
more. Mhm,
So it was a different type of summit.
mhm.
Yeah. So participatory design, but a participatory design not as informats, but as designers themselves and as people with knowledge themselves. So design with, and which eventually was empowering them so that they can design by themselves. And I really valued that. And I took it as something that maybe if I took it back home and I reapplied it myself in the context of Botswana, I had a lot of headway. So luckily, MIT Lab at the time was also giving out grants just to help you start your idea, do some initial market research. So I met a guy from India there over a smoke break. His name was
Uh,
Saga Mahapatra.
mhm.
Yeah, and Saga and I got close first and foremost because we were the only social scientists there.
Okay,
And
from
so
economics background, probably, right?
yeah, so he was
Uh-huh.
like a social development
Mhm.
background. I was an economics and account
And others
background,
were from design, engineering,
doing a master's in development.
technical fields,
Others were
probably.
doing design, engineering, and then we had
Mhm.
like the local community members who were just
Mhm.
like, your pastors, your teachers, your health workers, your just a community member. And it was quite interesting to just see how those multi-sectors came together, especially because the teams had different people as well. Like you'd have a designer, you'd have an advertiser, you'd have like people with different background. You'll just have a pastor in there. Like in my team, I was working with old women in the Luangwa district in a village called Mwavi. So their challenge was that they
This
weave
was in
palm
Zambia.
trees. Yeah, this was in Zambia. So they weave palm trees, mats and baskets and everything. But technologically was how the palm tree itself, how to cut it nicely, how to, but also they were not getting real value for their money because market agents would come to the village and buy them for cheap kwacha, but then they will take them to Lusaka town and then sell them for exorbitant prices, right?
Mhm.
So they wanted to
So the farmers were
design
not
something
getting
which,
much from
yeah, they
the
were not
harvest
getting
which they
value
were
for their
having.
money, but they spend a lot of time doing that, and then it didn't really
Mhm.
help them
And the
with
middlemen were getting
anything.
most of the fruits of their hard work, kind of, right?
So it was leaf product So like a weaved hat from palm trees, a weaved basket from palm trees, leaves, like a mat. So it wasn't necessarily food, but you know, they were buying them for cheap. And it was like products that are of top quality, and then they were selling them in Lusaka for high prices. So the agents were making a lot. The community members who were actually working on the products themselves were not actually making anything in terms of income. But you know, they were desperate for anything, and they pushed themselves beyond limits to have as many products as possible to at least maximize on what they can make. And so we went in there in Luangwa to co-create with them and, you know, design some solutions with them. And yeah, they eventually, as opposed to other projects, designed about 4 solutions, like a stripper ring, which helped them to strip the leaves evenly. They had a weaving stand, which helped them to weave with uniformity and just holding the thing on your thighs. They designed, you know, a bag which was full of grass, which was under trees for a very long, cushioned in a way, but uncushioned, and it led to many economic challenges, particularly for their backs. And you know, we eventually supported them and eventually did these technologies and we eventually exhibited them. But Saga and I, as we Zambia, like, yeah, villages and we met, and now we are leaving. And yeah, I can't imagine calling these people from India with just my airtime or even very expensive. What am I going? Because it is really depending on me. So I'm like, yeah.
Black, it's
A
getting
silly
cut.
question. So
Sorry to interrupt, but it's still getting cut a bit.
space.
Is it possible to
No worries.
adjust the settings?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Now it's better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's better. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I asked Saga, so like, hey man, you know, Facebook is a very good tool. What if we did something like Facebook, but strictly dedicated to the work that we've just did with these people? So to keep having these conversations about their technologies, keep reminding people about the co-creative design process, linking those that are in America and India with those that are on the ground in Zambia, what. And then he's
So
like,
you mean
yeah,
like
but
a
the
social
people
network
don't
of
have internet.
grassroots innovators? Is that what you're trying to say?
Grassroots innovators and social innovators, plus also the technical people that can support them to move their products forward, right? And so he said to me, like, yeah, but these people don't have internet. And then I'm like, yeah, but can't you access internet without using internet? So we laughed about it, but then that's where These Hands was born, because These Hands was first born as a social media platform to facilitate co-creation between these grassroots innovators and those that have internet access and technical skills to support them and the time
Could you
to
give
do
an
so,
example
but
of this? This is I didn't hear about this
using
backstory
internet.
though. How is it possible
Yeah.
to use internet without using internet?
So basically a USSD. So you know, a USSD platform allows you to access internet information, right? But without actually using internet. You can use your airtime, you can use so a 2G cell phone, 196 there. But as you're doing this, it just charges where if you go in for 2 weeks, it'll charge you, 50 cents. And if you go in for a whole month, it'll charge you $1 of your airtime credit. And this was a good solution, and we developed it. And then we validated it by applying for the Orange Africa Social Venture Prize. And it was of the Botswana award. And then it went to the Africa finals, and it didn't win it, but it was validated because it was in the top 11 of all the African solutions that came out.
So
And
this
but
the
then
mission of this network was to help in the flow of communication between these people in the grassroots. What was the vision or the objective behind these hands itself as a
yeah,
social network?
so basically it was to facilitate that communication, because as you remember, I mentioned Saga and I felt bad that we were going to not be able to talk and support these guys going forward. So we said, okay, maybe if we create this platform where we can use internet and they can use USSD and we can still communicate, because if we used SMS based, it was still going to charge them a little bit more money, but
Mm-hmm.
unless, as opposed to the USSD platform and subscription model we had in mind. But then, as this was not enough, we designed the thing, we launched it online, but then to launch it offline, which is the USSD platform, we had to partner with the mobile technology company.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we applied for the Orange Africa Social Venture Prize.
Mm-hmm.
But even after winning and after coming back from the P11, or like, yeah, but it doesn't make sense for us to give you a billing platform when you actually have no users as yet. Because
Mm-hmm.
at the time we actually won that award, it was in 2015, we had only trained about 30 people. And
It had
so,
to go a bit
30
more
people,
of a larger scale for it to be a larger network, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when we pivoted our business model to focus largely now on the physical trainings and setting up innovation centers,
Mm-hmm.
because then this will allow us to populate numbers of people whom, when we are ready now to go back to the mobile network provider, then we will actually have the numbers. So
This was
Botswana
also in a
alone
way
has just
continuing
about,
with the philosophy of MIT D Lab and
yeah,
what they have in mind as well, right?
exactly. Yeah. So this throughout this whole time now, we are implementing partners of MIT D Lab and the International Development Innovation Network. So everything is still based on that philosophy, right? Now,
Would it
the
be possible to
catch
explain a bit for people who are not aware of this whole approach, and why is
oh
it
yeah,
something which is very important for, say, grassroots mobilization
yeah.
of the youth
So
and so on? So if you could explain a bit, that would
yeah,
be nice for the
so
people.
yeah, basically the MIT D Lab and the International Development Innovation Network philosophy of co-creation is such that we do not, as designers or engineers, see ourselves as messiahs to people's problems. We see ourselves as possible technical support, and we value everybody, whether they have certain background or qualifications, because everybody's thoughts and contribution towards addressing a problem, particularly one they know best, compared to the person who's coming from outside,
Which makes
will
complete
yield
sense, right? I
unique
mean, they know the
solutions.
problem more
Yeah,
than anyone else. And if you as a designer
exactly.
think that you know more than them, that's outright
Yeah, I
stupidity.
mean, even myself staying in the city, in the same country with the same people who have the problem, I would never know their problem
Mhm.
better than them. So, for example, if you were to ask me, did I understand what the problem of those guys I used to walk with to kindergarten was? I would probably say yes, but I would probably would not be telling the truth because they know it better. And
Mhm.
if somebody was to come to me and say, what is the problem in this village? I would say, I think it's best to ask those guys as opposed to me, because the perspective I would give you would probably have a modern touch, because I would be coming with expectations of my upbringing to say, yeah, if we had a TV station here in this village, because I would have one from the town where I'm coming from, then maybe things would improve. But that's for me. For the people who are actually in the grassroots, they have their form of entertainment. And maybe if you were to facilitate that for them, it would actually be more amazing as opposed to giving them
Mhm.
a TV which they don't even value, right?
Yeah, I
So
think we
it's
can only think
basically the
of it
philosophy
in
of
our own
MIT
terms,
lab.
right?
Yeah,
They might know
exactly,
the context much better than us, and yeah.
exactly. But we can probably technically, because from our schooling and from our modernity, we have seen certain things. And so if we couple that knowledge with their indigenous knowledge, some beautiful things usually come out of that, and we have seen them come out of that in the 62 countries that we have worked in, and from the many 1,000 plus innovators that we have now in the network. So these
So the
hands
co-creation is the
basically,
key, right? In terms of bringing
the
best of both
co-creation
worlds.
is exactly, and even in our trainings, we always remind our participants that the product or the technology is just the vehicle. The actual thing we want them to grasp the most is the process, because once they own the process, they can run and address their own livelihood challenges by themselves without having to depend on us coming back and forth to
So it's
support them.
something like teach a man how to fish and he will be fishing for a lifetime kind of a thing, right?
Exactly. Exactly
Hmm.
what we encourage.
So
Because
if you
if
make
we
the
keep
process
giving them the
clear,
fish, then they just become dependent. So we made the process clear. So even after they produce the prototypes and they have the actual product, we don't actually run with them for them. No, we guide them and keep telling them and guiding them around the co-creative design process, as so they can now turn it to a community business or a business that they can use to sustain
hmm,
themselves. And their models differ from project to project based on the context. Sometimes
hmm.
they even use mental models where a person from the innovation center can rent out a technology to the community members because he knows they can't afford to buy it. But then to sell to hardwares, they sell for a certain price. And then, so it differs. And this is the uniqueness of this work that we do, because we see different solutions which are borrowed from open source ideas, but then are born in new type of technologies which are contextual based and are addressing immediate livelihood challenges of the people that are actually designing them, and not designed somewhere and then shipped to these people and say, hey, use this. This will work for you. When the
Because then the
people
supply
actually
chain would
never.
be totally different, right? Like the materials you get there
Exactly.
would be different. So you need it very contextualized.
Yeah. So, and even it helps them actually the entire value chain. Other people can focus on one element of the entire process of getting the project to market, as opposed to if it is coming as a supplied thing and you're just deploying it there. Because then you're just giving it to an NGO to say, yeah, go around supplying this in the households, done. And then the households are just receiving the thing, but they don't know what for, how it works. If it gets damaged, they have to depend on somebody having to come from somewhere to come and fix it.
Mhm.
So
They should be
in
self-reliant,
our
right? They shouldn't be dependent either on the
exactly,
NGOs or the
yeah.
government or
So
anyone else.
in type of so in our type of philosophy, we do design with them so that they can actually get the skills and master the process. And then as they stay by themselves, then now they become designers by themselves, and they can co-create amongst themselves as a community and give each other ideas and then solve their own challenges because they know them better. And we keep facilitating for, helping them with material here and there, bringing some technical students here and there and faculty here and there, just so that the project keeps moving forward. And
So Black,
we
how
realized,
difficult is this whole training process or helping them come to a stage where they
yeah,
could co-create
actually,
themselves? And if you could explain a bit, I think it's not an easy job to get to that stage. And if you could also explain a
yeah,
bit of the challenges you face, that would be interesting as well.
yeah. So one of the biggest challenges is motivation. So as we know, the world is motivated by cash. And, it's not a bad thing sometimes. It's just because everybody's on survival mode. And, if you know the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you are somewhere there at hierarchy
You're looking
number,
at the base needs right now, right? I mean,
yeah, if you're at the base, you're basically saying, hey, I'm afraid of death. So anything that can help you to eat that day, you will do it, right? As you keep
right.
progressing, anything that will give you some form of comfort, you go for it. Anything that will help you get some form of success, you'll go for it. But then there are opposites of type, right? So those people who are in the fear of failure are those people who are wanting to succeed so much. Those people who are in the fear of death are those people who are wanting to just survive. And these are the people at the base of the pyramid, right? So what we do is to try and ensure consistency in our support system. because income from technology development will take a long time, because a prototype, you develop it, you iterate it, develop it, iterate it,
and then it comes
up
to a
until
final product, and you need to take it to the marketplace
exactly.
as well.
Yeah, exactly. But in that time, you still have to eat something, right? So many of the people that we work with are indigenous in their cultures and in their crafts of other things. So they make crafts, arts and crafts. So what we did was, we even had engagements with MIT Museum, where we could try and sell some of their crafts there. In Netherlands, there in Texel was a Huizak Texel fair trade store, and basically sell fair trade goods from across the world. So when I was there, at some point I negotiated with the lady, and it wasn't a consignment per se, but we were able to send some crafts there, so that people can keep seeing them and buy it. And as they buy them, they keep their markup, then they send us the value back, and then we can pass that to the innovators as a short-term income. And then the reason why we set them up into innovation centers, which are just these co-working spaces, which are in rural communities, not like Silicon Valley, but they provide the same context. A place where people can meet, exchange ideas, access material for free, access technical support for free, and be able to move their technology forward. And this keeps them engaged. And if you add other optional things, then it keeps them not just thinking about their product, but also learning new skills. So for example, the one in Diga has like an ICT space, which has computers which were donated, and an internet, and a printer. So it offers from time to time, printing services to the community. From time to time, it teaches the community members basic ICT literacy skills, just to empower them and keep them engaged.
It opens up the world for them, right?
And then
in fact,
it
they
also
could even
teaches
start
them
their
a
own
little bit of,
businesses if they need.
Exactly. So it also teaches them some basic research about how to research about their technology, so that they can develop them further without having to depend on the other people who are supporting them, stuff like that. But the biggest challenge is having the consistent financing to get this running. And
I think that is one of the biggest challenges for a rural innovation lab,
because
sustainability and a financial model, right? For keeping
because like you can charge people exorbitant prices for printing, like in the cities, because they can't afford it. But you can also just say, okay, pay with your goats, or
it should also not be given for free, right? So they wouldn't be having an ownership for it.
Yeah, so you always have to play like a catch-22 pricing strategy, which is not giving too much. So for example, with all our innovation come to our rural innovation centers, we don't charge them anything. But once the project is done and now ready to go to market, that's when we start charging them 10% of every sale.
Oh, it's more like a freemium model. It's free until you do something. But then if it goes to the market,
until you actually have the thing we can make money with you from. But we're not going to be making money from you milking you for lifetime. We do it for 3 years. And that's why we're even charging it on per sale, not on profits, so that we are not harming you too much. And then we let you go. Because
it's based on the number of goods sold, you will be getting a
business.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting.
So it's an interesting model, but we also realize that the numbers in Botswana, and just social entrepreneurship in Botswana, is a fairly new thing. But our numbers also are disadvantageous to try and bring in your right impact investors.
It's a very scarcely populated region, if I'm not wrong, right? Botswana.
Yeah. So we're basically 2.2 million, and I service as a target 850,000 people. We've so far reached about 5,000 people in terms of just reach, like people who know about what we do, where we are. And we've trained about 400 people. We've so far now have about 5 rural innovation centers in 5 districts. It's good progress. We struggle to get there, but we don't want to struggle anymore.
Effort,
So what we have now done is that in Zambia, and Zambia has a huge population. In Tanzania has a huge population. We also have
these are
neighboring
countries.
Yeah, these are These are neighboring countries, one border after the other. They also have MIT D-Lab
In
training
Zambia.
and IDIN network membership. Yeah, so in Zambia and in Tanzania. And since we belong to the same regional bloc, which is called SADC, so Southern African Development Community, so we decided to come together and set up a consortium. And this consortium was lucky to be given a grant by the Finnish government. And now what we will be doing is we'll be expanding our work in country, so within Botswana, in Zambia, and in Tanzania, but also in expanding the philosophy to other Southern African countries so that it grows. And we found that our coming together was a better way of attracting resources and sustaining the consistency that we seek so that our innovators can actually keep or stay at these rural innovation centers and keep working on the projects up until they are actually able to make the right income. And
so does this consortium help the rural innovators in some way, as in right now with Botswana itself is a very scarcely populated region, right? So probably the market itself is a bit small, but by joining this sort of a consortium, they could access a larger base of users probably. Are you imagining something of that sort?
So basically there's several things that brought us together. The first one, we will need to pool resources. And if we are together, it will us for impact, right? And then two, to share value of our markets, right? So in Botswana, for example, we need a lot of agricultural technology implements or just technology around agriculture because we're three-quarter desert. So anything that could go a long way in trying to assist, rural farming in some way, which in Zambia and in Tanzania, they actually produce, right? So what happens is for national exhibitions and fairs, we will be bringing our Zambia and Tanzania technology counterparts to exhibit them here because here they have a market demand. In Zambia and in Tanzania, everybody's producing them there, so it's saturated, right?
So Zambia gets an advantage by joining along with Botswana in this consortium. Right?
Exactly, yeah. So they are able to sell their products in Botswana. And Botswana, we produce uniquely ostrich eggshell jewelry, for example.
Ostrich eggshell, sorry?
Zambia, ostrich eggshell jewelry.
Jewelry, okay. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So Zambia, in Zambia, they like it, but they don't have it. So it's unique only to Botswana. So when they have exhibitions that side, we make sure that we find our people space that side. So
is the ostrich eggshell so hard that you can make jewelry out of it? Oh.
Yeah, you can't even just crack it. They even had to make a technology to be able to make piercings on it, to crack it, to cut it. Yeah, it's a very hard shell. Yeah, and it's very slippery. I'll send you a gift of one of the jewelry pieces one of these days. Because I still have some things there in Netherlands, and you're not far. Nice. You're in Delft, Amsterdam, nearby. Yeah, so my kids still have, so I can ask their mother to give you a piece from one of our things. Yeah. Anyway, so that's basically the philosophy of why we came together, and then also to just skills exchange. So some of the innovators in Zambia are more skilled at certain things than the ones in Botswana or the ones in Tanzania. So it's to pool all this knowledge together to avoid also depending too much on MIT, D-Lab, and the students and the faculty there, and have our own thing which we are running locally with the same understanding, but sharing skills and technical abilities as well for better and greater progress for the Southern African bloc. So this is where we are going with it. Unfortunately, we didn't start yet because of Corona, but post-Kofifi, we are hitting the road again, and we will then eventually expand into Namibia. And hopefully we will be able to recruit you to attend IDDS Namibia 2021. So look out for that.
I think this would be nice if it can expand to a larger number of African countries, right? And I think every country would be
Yeah,
benefited by such a network
thing that
because there's
we
always
were
cross transfer of ideas, right? And everyone could access the technologies and make it contextual.
exactly.
Hmm.
So we decided, as I always do, I decide to start small, and then once the
Hmm.
thing is working, I bubble it up, right?
Hmm.
So luckily, as we were getting the grant, we also had to get a financier because the grant we got, they can only give us the cash after implementation. So we had to find a financier who could give us the funds in advance, and then as we get paid, we can
We can
prepay
pay
them
back
back.
the grant.
But
Yeah.
luckily, yeah, into a partnership with the multinational corporation bank, which was actually born in Botswana as well, but it has spread into most of African countries. So they have a wide reach within the Southern African market, and then they also have a wide reach in East Africa and in West Africa. So we have gone into a corporate social investment partnership, corporate strategic investment partnership with them, post the grant, where we will now explore growing with them
Hmm.
to other countries within the Southern Africa region where they have a footprint, but also to other African countries where they have a footprint. And then eventually, once we have this growth, we can see how we can link up with, NEPAD and AU and other organizations to see how we can buttress it as a philosophy in other countries, which we won't have a footprint in.
I have a
But
question here,
in
Black.
addition to,
So
yeah,
for these programs to be successful, do you need an intervention or any participation by the government by any chance? I could see that there are larger players, say the international granting organizations, right? And then you
yeah,
have the
so
banks.
I would,
But how does the participation of the local governance or the larger bodies involved?
yeah, so I would say government, whether they're funding or not funding, they are
It
key
doesn't really
as a
affect.
partner. First and
Mhm.
foremost, no, they are key as a partner
They're key partners.
because,
Okay.
yeah,
Mhm.
they're key partners in the sense that first and foremost, you are servicing their communities. Communities which they are mandated over, right, by the constitution to take care of, first and foremost. And then for you to access uh, community leaders like chiefs, the village development councils, and all these other organizations which we largely partner with, so that we are actually able to set up the things that we set up with these communities free of charge. You have to have that government backing. So we don't necessarily depend on them for funding. Where they can fund, great. But where they can facilitate our credibility to communities, but also to external donors. So for example, because we are members of the Botswana Innovation Hub here in Botswana, which is a government entity, we were able to get support from them when we were applying for the grant to the Southern Africa Innovation Support Program, which is a Finnish government funded program.
And
And
what kind of
because of that
impact
credibility,
outcomes are you looking at? So with
so
the
the
program, what would
outcomes,
be the manifestation?
so the manifestation is to largely produce about at least five selling technologies that will be helping to improve people's lives within the SADC region. Empower as many people as possible within the four countries to own the co-creative design process and use it in their daily lives to improve their own challenges. And then start setting up TM so that eventually it operates independently over there with it without the influence of the three
To
entities
make
that
it
started it.
self-sustainable. So,
Exactly.
so the revenue of the
That's what
products would
we're
then be
moving.
used to feed it back to the lab itself so that the lab runs on its
Ex-
own
ex-
instead of being dependent on
exactly.
grants.
Yeah. So basically, the revenue of the sales will
Mhm.
help set up the secretariat of the consortium. So it will help be paying, office
Hmm.
space, secretariat costs, and all the like, which will go to facilitating the support of all these technologies and all these programs that have been important. So it is a regional block of the global uh, IDIN world. And we are planning now to set up one around Oceania, Southeast Asia,
Oh,
India, and the Mediterranean, because that's another space within the IDIN network that doesn't have that
It has
on the
not been
ground
explored so
facilitation.
far, right? In terms of the
So
creative capacity building.
exactly. So we basically have many network members in those spaces, but they don't have like a co-joining thing, which allows them to meet, gather, exchange ideas, support each other, and the likes. So I'm currently working on that. I have applied for a fellowship in New Zealand. Hopefully, I'll make it, and I'll start from New Zealand and catapult into these nearby places. And hopefully, by
Oceania
that
and
time,
all these places,
you
right?
will also be back in India, and we can see how partner.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I believe that the work that you do is similar to the work that we do. You have
I see a
focused on
lot of
youth.
convergence
We have
here, even in
opened it.
terms of
Yeah,
your model, in terms of the labs and how you can really bring about the decentralized philosophy of
yeah,
the
exactly.
people coming together and building things for their own good, right? So that's something I also deeply resonate with
Yeah, exactly.
in terms of my organization as well.
Yeah. So basically, we don't really run these innovation labs. They are run by the community members. We just basically facilitate that they run them for their better success, right? So from time to time, we ask them to send us, so we see what they are lacking, what they have achieved, and then if they need extra support, we can find either in technical support or financial support or material support. Then we make sure they have those things so that they don't get demoralized and give up, and they can keep working, right? So I foresee that spirit large and by, and it is heavy in people who are in the rural context, in the slum context, in the refugee context, in the poverty context, because their people are on survival mode, as I mentioned. So,
Well, they don't have food on the
but
plate,
like,
and then
yeah,
if they
so
could in a way
like
be
if you
given
keep
a
your
system, right?
they will move. Yeah. So if they find the next best thing to do to get food on the table because you are not being consistent with them, they move on to that. And you shouldn't blame them. You should encourage it, but also encourage them so that they can keep doing what you are hoping they're doing from it. So many people always also ask me, so how are you making money of this? So I hope one day when we launch the USSD platform, it will make us revenue between when people are using it. Right now, we are hoping that the technologies will eventually get to sale point and we can have some bit of revenue from that. But that's not my main goal right now. My main goal is to set the fire in action. And once the fire is in action, I don't know, maybe the people in Australia will tell us better. When
But
the
I think
bushfire
that
starts, it's very
even if they
difficult.
start
It's
believing,
very
right?
difficult to stop them. That's what I mean. Once the people start believing and they have the confidence in the process. So I'm using the example of fire because, like, for example, with the bushfire, if it starts, and I was saying if the people of Australia could maybe, say it for us, it's very difficult to stop something that is on fire, right? Especially when the fire is really hot,
Really, yeah,
right?
yeah.
So this is what my main goal is to just go around sparking fires, and then bringing these fires together so that the fires becomes very strong, and then it becomes unstoppable. And when we will make money, it'll come. But it's not the main thing that gives me joy. When I see an old lady who has never used a saw use a saw for the first time and get excited that she chipped a block of wood from a piece of wood, it gets me excited. Like, yeah, you can do it. And then she moves on to do it for other people, and then she gets even more confident. And I go home to sleep, and I'm like, yeah. If I go back to that village next time and that lady tells me, hey, I built myself that wooden thing there by myself because of skills that me. Because we believe that everybody has these innate skills. Some people are afraid of them because of patriarchal laws, matriarchal laws, just natural laws. There's a system where certain things are said to be for the man. But once you activate them out of the women, they realize, no, these things are for every one of us. And even the men start even shying away from like, nah, this lady does it better than I do. So let her do it, you know. And we've seen those things where we've broken taboos. So, for example, in Zambia, we've seen how co-creation led to breaking a taboo, a menstruation taboo within the village, you know.
Could you give
So
a bit more
men could,
depth to
yeah,
the story?
yeah, I was,
It's quite
yeah,
interesting.
I'm about to break it down. So basically, it's such that, you know, in a household in Zambia, when a young girl gets menstrual period, she would run to her mother to say, "Hey, mama, you know, I'm bleeding," and then the mother would, because the father is the provider of resources, and you know, if the mother would go to them and ask for the father would never really want to talk about that, you know, and it was a taboo for men to talk about menstruation. But in the co-creation project that they were working on, it was to address this lack.
Lack of communication, right?
So I decided to cut my video. I hope that's
Yeah, I think
okay.
that's better. Yeah, it's better now. The voice is better.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah, so basically I was saying in this village in Campelo, there was a challenge of menstruation, and it was a taboo for the men and the women to talk about menstruation. But so using co-creation, what happened was that they decided to address the challenge because there was a lack of sanitary pads or people being able to afford sanitary pads for the young girls, right? So what they did was they decided to make a reusable pad from local material there within the community. And in order for the men to come on board, because men love money, they put them in charge of being sales agents to sell so that they can make the money. And then they put the women and the girls in the workshop so that they could be the ones sewing these pads and producing them in large quantities. And it eventually led to one of the community members being the champion of these pads, and we called him Mr. Flying Pads. And he went all over Zambia selling pads, which was very weird to many people, but he was also helping to break the taboo of talking about menstruation as a man, and it made things very easy and very harmonious in that community. So there's a beauty in this co-creation process, and I value it so much, and I defend it with my life. I treat it as my Bible.
Black, it's. I mean, the stories are really interesting. I wish you could similar such story of a rural innovator going on to take his product forward or bringing about a larger social change.
Yeah, we have many actually. So
Maybe you could pick
I'll
something which
try.
is close to you.
Yeah, so here in Botswana, for example, we had a young boy. He was 21 years old. He loved bicycles from a young age, and he liked, you know, changing bicycle wheels, fixing them, tires and chains and everything. So he really loved that aspect. So he applied for one of our summits, which was in Dika, and he applied to be part of a project which was called the Deep Sand Wheelchair Project. So they were
The deep
designing
sand,
basically
the deep sand
deep sand
wheelchair.
wheelchair. Yeah. So basically,
What does
it's a
that mean?
wheelchair that it's a wheelchair that can move in rough terrains or within the deep sand of the Kalahari,
Oh,
because
even in the
all
desert, you can use the
other
wheelchair.
all
That was the idea.
yeah, that was the whole idea, because the current ones that are meant for rough terrains actually wear and tear very easily within
You can't really use
the
it in a
deserts.
desert, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So he and his team members worked on that, and he fell in love now with wheelchairs. And he was very fortunate because he was working with you know, a World Health Organization expert and a lecturer for wheelchair design at MIT lab in the team. And so they eventually made a nice deep sand wheelchair, which is pedal powered, has a front wheel, and has two BMX bicycle double tires on the sides. So this guy doesn't need anybody to push him now to use his wheelchair. He just pedals. And so it was a unique accessory kit that they added to an already existing Rough Rider wheelchair. But as if this was not enough, so the guy got super passionate about wheelchairs and wanted to fix this wheelchair from prototype up until he eventually donated it to the person that they were working with to make it for.
The
right?
user himself, right? So the user
Yeah,
was in a way
so the
using the
user was
final product.
involved. Yeah, the user was involved in the design from
Yeah.
word go,
Hmm.
and eventually, after everybody left, Gaming now kept going back to him, and they kept designing it up until. But there
Until
was
he
a
was
hiccup.
like completely
Yeah,
satisfied
but
with it.
but there was a hiccup. He couldn't just let this guy use the wheelchair because he's not a basic level service provider or an advanced service level provider, because a wheelchair is not like a bicycle, it's a medical device, so it needs to be checked by physiotherapists for the right
Oh, for a
stuff and
medical
whatnot.
approval
Yeah,
before which the person could use it, right?
yeah. So basically he was like, ah man, what am I going to do now? So I said, we work with Disacare in Zambia, and they accredit basic level service provision, but they can also teach you how to make a wheelchair, proper wheelchair, because the one you just made here, you didn't really bend any steel or whatever. You just basically took an existing wheelchair and you
And
changed
modified
its
it.
tires and modified it. Yeah. So then I was fortunate to find him sponsorship, and we sent him to school. And he came back from Disacare knowing now how to make wheelchairs, and now with basic level service provision. And he went back to the village to get to the nearest distical device, and he donated it to this young guy that he was working with. And then from there, he went on
So
to
let me
work with,
rewind a bit. So you got him a scholarship to do his studies, right? And during this time,
yeah,
he was parallelly looking at ways to get medical approval for the wheelchair itself.
exactly.
Oh,
So he
wow.
wanted to become the person who will make the wheelchair and become a
Mm.
medical approver. So there's two levels. There's basic level, and then there's advanced level. So advanced level is usually for physiotherapists, and then basic level is actually for the designer themselves
Mhm.
to know that, okay, but at this level and at this angle, when I do these basic tests, the wheelchair is fine.
In some of ways, he
So
had
that
this
the
relentless spirit to
physiotherapist
bring this
comes
to
and
reality, right?
approves
To
it,
make this happen, to
right?
get the approval.
So he finished the prototype and then donated it to his friend, because now by this time they were now friends and brothers. They had worked together for a very long time, and then from there
What is the time
he had
span now? Like it has been for 2-3 years or something.
yeah, he did this in 2016, so
2016.
it's 4 years ago.
Mm.
Yeah, and he donated it in like 2018,
Mm.
and so it took him about 2 years to actually get it deployed, and then he had approached the government to go around to maybe modify and even repair some of their wheelchairs. They're still pending on a back and forth negotiation with him. But he was fortunate last year to have won a grant to
Mhm.
be able to set up a workshop where now he will become Botswana's first producer and manufacturer of wheelchairs. And the biggest buyer of wheelchairs is government. So they'll have no choice to eventually but come back to him. And we have linked him up with other people in the region who can be his support system. And he still has contact with that World Health Organization expert and the MIT lecturer. And so he's now on his own. He has registered his business. It's called Huiku, which is a
This
Sen
is
name,
amazing. Oh, what's the name
deep
again? I
send.
would probably search it up as well.
Yeah. So
It's Zigu.
Huiku,
Mhm.
Huiku.
Huiku. Okay. Mhm.
Yeah. And yeah, so now he's running Huiku. I've had from him, I think, recently, just to say what's up, not to really demand or ask anything from me.
Oh.
And
Mhm.
I said what's up back. And yeah, so these are some of the things that give me joy.
Hmm.
And so, like, basically, there are some people that come and get inspirations from co-creating with some of these communities. There are some people from
Hmm.
the communities themselves that get inspiration. So, for example, some of our trainers, rural innovation center managers of these communities that we have.
Mhm. So the
And
labs have a
these are
trained
people,
community
some of them
manager.
without any formal schooling. So, yeah.
Mhm.
So basically, we took them for a trainer of trainers, so that we capacitate them, so that everybody who keeps coming to support, to ask for support at their innovation centers, they are able to technically assist them as well, because they now know the process, know some technical tools and everything beyond
The training of the
just
trainers
having,
in a way.
yeah. So these are some of the successes basically. And for me, I don't measure success in terms of money. I measure it in terms of even a different impact metric. So my impact metric is just happiness.
Yeah, I think
So the
it
more
makes sense.
people,
You shouldn't be measuring it
yeah,
in terms of the number of products or making businesses. I
yeah,
think that is maybe a tangible one, but probably the
yeah,
even the very fact that they are having the confidence of their own
yeah,
creative potential is itself a big change, right?
exactly. So if people are happy and confident about owning the process and running with the process for anything, and feeling it can see them out of the thresholds of, of what they are going through, then I believe I have success. But other people measure it differently, and I don't have a problem with that. I try to satisfy all the measurements, but that's my main one.
But does it come to
So
a
for
point where you have to
example,
measure happiness? I mean, that would be a bit difficult to measure, right? Like, how do you?
yeah, no, but it's a very easy thing if you do it the way we do it. So for example, I've once ran a training in a village which had about 3 different tribes, and it looked like one tribe was dominant over the 2 other tribes, right? And within the training, as you're training, sometimes it starts off first, you'll be like, okay, these are probably just team dynamics. And then you start seeing that it's becoming tribalistic or ethnic or
So there
whatever.
are some groups which are more dominant over the others, and that kind of
Yeah,
shows in the team itself, where they kind of
yeah, and
dictate
then
terms and so on, right?
yeah, and then they start rubbishing ideas of others, and we don't rubbish ideas of others in our world. So when such things start sparking and start becoming consistent during the training,
How do you really do that then? How do
I can
you?
even stop the training, and then we come into a circle. I air my observations. I take everybody's thoughts, and if it just continues persistently, even within that circle when we're talking, I can stop the training and I leave them with the message: unite, because you are one and you are faced with the same challenge in the same village. Once you are united, you have my details. You can engage me back. I'll be glad to come back and continue. And, they thought I was joking, but I went ahead and I did it. And just of recent, they started calling me, okay, we have united now. We understood what you meant, please come back.
Does it
So
have
I'm
any
going to do,
meaning with your the logo of your organization itself with these hands? I mean, it seems to be. It kind of
yeah,
makes me think it's about uniting together and.
so basically these hands is all about that. It's about, not the 1 billion mouths of people that we have to feed, but the 2 billion hands that are ready to engage and make a difference in our
Wow,
right?
that's
So
nice.
it's people engaging. It's everybody who's willing to engage, either with a technical person or either with a person in their community to address a challenge which they're faced with without having to depend on people somewhere to come and solve problems for them, or government to come and solve problems for them. That's basically what these hands
Self-reliance.
Self-reliance. So the co-creative design process activates that spirit of self-reliance and using your only available resources. So how to make a difference for yourself with the limited resources that you have. Yeah. So, and that's the beauty of it. And I hope I live long enough to keep spreading the wealth.
Yeah, I hope so too. I mean, this is. I hope you can go to greater heights with the whole collaboration and teaming up with a lot of people working in same lines. I hope there are many such players in Africa as well who are doing such work, especially in decentralized rural development, right?
Yeah. I mean, as I mentioned, so we have a presence in Ghana, we have a
Ghana.
presence in Kenya, we have a presence in Rwanda, we have a presence in Uganda and Tanzania, and then Botswana, Zambia. So with the consortium, we'll be trying to expand it now into other Southern African countries, and then eventually we'll try to reach other African countries. I already have some partners who are ready to collaborate in like Tunisia, who own a maker space in the city, but
In
love
Tunisia.
them. Yeah, and they're called the L space, EL space.
EL space.
Yeah, and basically they run a space, it's like Silicon Valley in Tunisia, run by youth. But they like the approach that we use to address, immediate rural community challenges. So we are working on a future collaboration with them. And you as well at DHive, we hope to collaborate with you and activate India again. I mean, India was activated, but I still feel like
I think there should be more work done, especially with what's happening in Africa and with your organization and many other players. I feel, I think there should be a similar movement in India as well with grassroots.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And by
this is
India,
wonderful,
we mean
Black. I mean, I've learned a lot by just having this conversation with you with this whole. I mean, I'm truly speechless a bit with whatever you said.
No, but I equally follow your work, and it inspires me a lot, because one of the things that people don't get it is delivering pedagogy to kids is so difficult, particularly, dangerous work type of pedagogy. Because you get them to use a drilling machine, a saw, sure, but they're not doing it under control environments, as like at a workshop space at a school, because there, you're told what to do and whatnot. In your case, you tell them, but you don't really guide them, like, and then they have fun in the process, but then they make actual things, right? And so I kind of think I need to come learn how to teach kids. I've only done it once with a group of juveniles, and it was very, very difficult.
But it's also fun, but it's also challenging, and there is
and then
a need for
with elderly people. And then with elderly people, it's easy, but it's also difficult, because the easy part is they can understand, right? When you start, and then especially if you keep it fun, they become engaged. But then the difficulty is, it's very difficult for an old person to unlearn what they already know and learn something.
I think unconditioning might be a tough task for them, right? So they are
exactly.
It's so much set in stone that changing even basic things or the way they approach things would be a bit difficult.
So that's why the consistency of supporting them and showing them the process in action is very, very key. As opposed to a child, if you show them the light once, they'll be curious about it and they'll keep breaking to try and get to that light. So that with an elderly person, if you show them the light once, they'll be like, okay, that was it.
But I also see interesting possibilities of co-creation of children with adults, right? So as you say, adults
that's where I see the opportunity, particularly for what you've already started in India, because it's a typical thing of just riding on the wave that you've created, but then bringing corporate India on board, institutional academia India on board, students on board, and then rural community elders on board. But they are being led by these young, self-taught designers.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if adults and children and also the designers, engineers, all of them come together and bring together something valuable for the people?
That's what we encourage, because that's co-creation. A kid, you can learn many things from a child because they're super curious. So they prick and poke many things on a daily basis, and they learn new things from that, right? So I know, for example, for me to learn that electricity really actually carries current and it will choke you. I put my tongue in a cable source once when I was a kid, and I realized after I got choked, I should never ever do that, right?
It's the experience which you get.
An adult will
that's a real learning.
Probably just like, okay, I'm told this thing will do this. Exactly. So there are more experiential learners as opposed to the adults, but the adults also have had experiential learning from having to go through the adulting process, right? From kid, young adults, adults.
Yeah.
So it's a whole combination of values, and it's a whole combination of mindsets, which if you bring together, you just get this wild, beautiful ideas that spark.
Yeah.
And it's the philosophy of what we call the IDDS spirit. So the IDDS spirit has international, right? And then it's practicing development, but it's also using design as a thinking. And it's a summit that produces actual prototypes, not papers from conferences where you publish public conferences, then nobody ever does anything.
Yeah, it almost becomes like the International Association of Name Droppers, right? So you just publish papers and then, I mean, where is the real change? Sometimes it just gets lost in a lot of papers. But of course, research and academia is also important, but
so this is
practice to be applied research, right? In a way.
So this was Amy's philosophy. This is Amy Smith's philosophy. She's the founder and director of MIT Lab. And basically, she founded MIT Lab after having grown up in India and actually staying and teaching in Botswana as a Peace Corps volunteer. And then going back, she started the D Lab class, which was just like a class to Haiti. And as it kept making more of an impact, she grew it into the MIT D Lab school. And started having courses, but it still carries the same philosophy of the Haiti class, which is going to co-create, not going to be messiahs, going to offer technical support where possible, but also learning from what the indigenous knowledge can also teach. So it's a teach me and I teach you type of process.
So the D Lab in terms of IDDS is pretty much active,
come
right?
up with a solution.
With all these happenings going on, with the conferences and so on.
Oh no, so IDDS, everything has been stopped. So we have postponed every activity of ours for
as of now with the COVID-19, right?
Yeah, because of COVID-19, and then everything will start again 2021.
Yeah. Anyway, so I will leave this at a high note. I mean, it's been a nice time talking to you, Blak. And I mean,
I truly appreciate it. I'm saying I truly appreciate the chat. So basically, as I told you, so nobody ever wants to check in with me about my work or what influenced it or why I do it. So this is a very special thing for me.
I mean, I really wanted to have a thoughtful conversation with you, like going really deep into what we're doing, right? And I feel really it to be really resonating with what I'm doing as well. So I really could connect well with your work. So it's nice to have you on this podcast, and I would hopefully be sharing this live. So looking forward to everything later on.
Yeah, nice one. Once you have shared it, I will spread it as well.
Sure.
So we keep spreading the fire.
And okay, Blak. Good to have you, man.
All right, brother.